I never believed in curses. Growing up, my parents would always tell me stories about haunted houses and ghostly apparitions, but I always shrugged them off as mere superstitions. That is, until I inherited Ravenwood Manor. Ravenwood Manor had been in my family for generations. It was a grand old mansion, nestled in the heart of the countryside, surrounded by acres of lush green forests. As a child, I would spend my summers there, exploring the sprawling gardens and playing hide and seek with my cousins. But now, as the sole heir to the estate, I had the daunting task of selling the property. It was a gloomy day when I arrived at Ravenwood Manor. The sky was overcast and a thick fog hung in the air, adding to the eerie atmosphere. As I made my way up the long, winding driveway, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The once majestic manor was now in a state of disrepair. The windows were shattered, the paint was peeling, and the gardens were overgrown with weeds. I hesitantly stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind me. The interior of the manor was just as dilapidated as the exterior. The furniture was covered in dust and cobwebs, and the walls were adorned with faded portraits of my ancestors. I couldn't wait to get out of there, but just as I turned to leave, a voice whispered my name. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard it again. This time it was louder and more urgent. I followed the sound to the grand staircase, and as I climbed the steps, the voice grew louder and more distinct. When I reached the top, I found myself standing in front of a locked door. The voice was coming from inside. Without thinking, I tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, it turned. I cautiously pushed the door open, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. The room was filled with old furniture, covered in white sheets. But what caught my attention was the figure standing in the corner. It was a woman, dressed in a tattered white dress, her long black hair covering her face. She beckoned me towards her, and against my better judgment, I stepped closer. As I approached, the woman's hair parted, revealing a face that was twisted in agony. Her eyes were hollow and her mouth hung open in a silent scream. I stumbled back in horror, and that's when I heard the story of the curse of Ravenwood Manor. Legend had it that many years ago, the manor was home to a cruel and wealthy family. The daughter of the family, Amelia, was in love with a poor stable boy, but her father forbade the relationship. In a fit of rage, Amelia's lover cursed the manor, vowing that anyone who inherited it would suffer a fate worse than death. From that day on, the manor was plagued by strange occurrences. The family's wealth diminished, and all those who lived in the house met a tragic end. The last inhabitant of the manor was Amelia herself, who died of a broken heart. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was all just a silly superstition, right? But as I turned to leave, the woman's ghostly hand grabbed my arm, her voice pleading for me to break the curse. Without a second thought, I ran out of the manor, vowing never to return. To this day, I have never set foot in Ravenwood Manor again. But sometimes, on dark and stormy nights, I can still hear the woman's screams echoing through the halls. And I can't help but wonder, was it all just a legend? Or is the curse of Ravenwood Manor real? It was a dark and stormy night, the perfect setting for a horror story. I had just started my new job at the doll factory, and I was excited to be working in such a unique and eerie place. Little did I know, this job would quickly turn into a nightmare. As I walked through the dimly lit factory, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The dolls that lined the shelves seemed to follow me with their glassy eyes, and their painted smiles seemed to turn into menacing grins. But I shrugged it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. My first task was to inspect the dolls for any defects before they were shipped out. As I picked up each doll, I couldn't help but notice how lifelike they were. They felt almost human in my hands, and it sent shivers down my spine. But I continued with my work, trying to push the eerie feeling away. As the night went on, the storm outside grew more intense, and the power flickered on and off. It was during one of these power outages that I first heard it, a faint whispering that seemed to be coming from the dolls. I thought it was just my imagination again, but the whispers grew louder and more distinct. I dropped the doll I was holding and quickly turned on my flashlight. As the beam of light shone on the dolls, I could see their mouths moving as if they were talking. I was frozen with fear, unable to move or speak. But then, suddenly, the power came back on, and the dolls went back to their lifeless state. I convinced myself that it was just a trick of the light and continued with my work, trying to ignore the chilling experience. But as the night went on, the dolls seemed to come alive more and more frequently. They would move on their own, whispering to each other, and I could swear I saw them blink. I was starting to question my sanity when I heard a loud crash coming from the storage room. I cautiously made my way towards the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. As I entered the room, I saw that one of the dolls had fallen off the shelf and shattered into pieces. But what caught my attention was the doll's face. It was my exact replica, with my features and even my name written on the back of its neck. I was overcome with terror, and I knew I had to get out of there. But as I made my way to the exit, I realized that all the dolls were now my doppelgangers. They were everywhere, surrounding me, and I could hear their whispers growing louder and more menacing. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back until I was outside. I never returned to that doll factory, and I quit my job the next day. But the nightmares of those dolls haunted me for years to come. And to this day, I still can't look at a doll without feeling a chill down my spine, knowing that they may not be as lifeless as they seem. I had always been fascinated by lighthouses. As a child, I would often imagine myself living in one, guiding ships safely to shore with its bright beacon. Little did I know, my childhood fantasy would turn into a nightmare when I stumbled upon the haunted lighthouse. It was a stormy night when my friends and I decided to explore the abandoned lighthouse on the outskirts of town. The locals had warned us about the lighthouse, claiming it was cursed and anyone who entered would never return. But being curious teenagers, we brushed off their warnings and ventured inside. The lighthouse was in a state of disrepair, with cobwebs covering every corner and the walls peeling with age. As we climbed the spiral staircase, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. My friends teased me for being spooked, but I knew something was off about this place. We reached the top of the lighthouse, and the view was breathtaking. The raging sea, the howling winds, and the dark clouds made for a perfect horror movie setting. But what happened next was far from a movie. As I turned to descend the stairs, I noticed a figure standing in the corner. It was a woman with long black hair covering her face. My friends didn't seem to see her, and I thought maybe it was just my imagination. But as we made our way down, the figure followed us, her eerie laughter echoing through the empty lighthouse. We ran out of the lighthouse, our hearts pounding with fear. But the woman didn't stop following us. She appeared in every window, her face contorted into a sinister grin. I could feel her cold breath on my neck, and I knew we were not alone. We finally made it outside, and as we looked back, the lighthouse was glowing with an otherworldly light. The woman stood at the top, her eyes glowing red, and she let out a blood-curdling scream. We ran as fast as we could, not daring to look back. From that day on, I couldn't shake off the feeling that the woman from the lighthouse was following me. I would see her in my dreams, and sometimes I would catch a glimpse of her in the corner of my eye. It was like she had latched onto my soul, and I couldn't escape her grip. Years went by, and I tried to forget about the haunted lighthouse. But fate had other plans. I received a letter from my childhood friend, inviting me to visit her at her new home. As I reached her house, I noticed it was near the same lighthouse from my nightmare. My friend greeted me with a smile, but I could sense something was off. She took me to the lighthouse, claiming it was her latest renovation project. As we climbed to the top, I felt a familiar chill run down my spine. And there she was, the woman from my nightmare, waiting for me. My friend seemed oblivious to her presence, and I knew I had to get out of there. But the woman wouldn't let me leave. She whispered in my ear, telling me that she had been waiting for me, and now I was trapped with her forever. Till this day, I am haunted by the woman from the lighthouse. She is a reminder that some childhood fantasies are better left unexplored, and that sometimes the scariest things are not just in our imagination but in the real world.